amazing life. In my opinion, the things that I've heard up to this point, and they haven't even come from him, you're going to be pretty entranced today for the next hour and a half. So I appreciate you being safe, kind, and responsible for Mr. Okello.
Thank you. Thank you. And how many of you have seen me around here before? Oh, there's a lot of you. You guys could be excused. You don't want to listen to me again. I will tell you a little bit. I am from East Africa. And if you don't know where Ethiopia is, when you go back to your class, look it up on your phone. I want you to know where it is on the continent. That's where I come from. I grew up there until I was about 9. And there's a civil war in my country that happened when I was a 3rd grader. The reason I was a 3rd grader, because the school from my house is 7 miles away. So you can send your 6-year-old to walk 7 miles 6 days a week and come back and think that he's going to do that. So our parents has to keep us at home until we're old enough to walk the 7 miles home. So that's what I was doing when I was little, but I went to school when I was 8 because my mother has an agreement with my older brother that if I get tired, he's gonna have to carry me home. I was a fat little kid. I don't think my brother would appreciate that, but I walked the whole time. So on May 5th, 1991, we went to school in the morning. By 8 o'clock, we have to be lined up outside of the school. We sing the national anthem before we go to class. We went to class for about 3 hours. 3 hours later, we have to get out for what they call break, because we don't have lunches. So if you have your own food, could be a food that you brought from home, and you can go with your friends, sit in the yard, and eat. But all of us, we like to play soccer. Who here like to play soccer? Anyone play soccer? Very good. That was the biggest sport to us. It's like a religion, actually outside of the United States. Soccer is a religion in every country. So we play soccer before we go to class. While we were playing soccer, we heard a loud bomb went off outside, like about 5 miles away from school. Being boys, we thought it was something funny. We left the girls over there. We ran where the bomb went off. When we got there, we saw dead bodies on the streets, and now we got scared. We realized that it's something dangerous. So we went back to school. Our principal was standing by the door. He was guiding his students to run back inside and go back to their classroom. I went back to my classroom. We sat down. We began to discuss between ourselves what exactly had taken place. Not only did we hear the bombing now, we can hear more bombs from a distance and airplanes and helicopters dropping bombs over the forest. At that point, my teacher walked in and told us exactly what to do. She said, lay down on the floor and don't get up because soon it's going to be worse. So they were talking to us. We lay down, they walk outside the door, and they lock the door from outside to make sure that we don't get out. These are 3 buildings built like this, one here, one on this side, one on the other side, and all of them was 1st graders through 4th. So they lock the doors to make sure that we don't run outside. At this point now, you can hear the bullets coming through the window of our classroom. And we get really terrified. For about 45 minutes, we were terrified laying down on the floor. While we were laying down now, our school does not have carpet. So we were laying in a hot cement. So the cement began to get really hot. My friend and I looked at each other and said, do you think the building is burning? He said, I don't know, but we can go look. So we walked to the window. We took a big table that belonged to the teacher usually. Our setup in the school is different than yours. We have the classroom and we have a desk for the teacher, and every time the bell rings, the teacher is the one that's leaving the room for the other teacher to come in. We don't move around. It's too many kids to move around. We have 2,000 kids in my school, 1st graders through 4th graders, because we don't have that many schools. So it'd be too much for us to walk around. So the teacher come out and goes in. So we move the table by the window, So we jump on the table and try to peek outside. While we were looking, we realized that the outer of the building is burning. So that's why it's getting warmer. So we told ourselves, okay, we're gonna get outside and try to find a way home. Because we couldn't see any teachers, any adult. So we broke the window. My friend and I argued who's gonna get out first. So I won that argument. I said, let me get out first, and then if I see a way home, I will come back for you. He said, okay. So at that time, I get outside. As soon as I get outside to look, the rebels start shooting. They were shooting at us, at me, in the building. So I ran away from the building. About a quarter miles away, there's a river. So I wanted to jump in the river and cross it and go to my village, to my mom and dad. But before I jump in the water, I realized that I told my friend that if I find a way home, I will come back for him. There's something that I want to tell you guys. That when we said you're my friend in my country, that means literally that I will die for you regardless of whatever happened to you. I will never leave you behind. That's a commitment. We are brothers. What we call friendship is to us also like brother. I turned around, went back in the building. When I tried to climb the wall, because I was a little shorter back then, I can't get to the window because the windows are higher up there. So I took my shoes off and climbed back in the building, and I told them that, hey, we're gonna die. The building is burning, there's a lot of military outside. Imagine telling third graders some of that kind of news. Everybody began to get up and run. And we're not running anywhere. We're just going in a circle crying. 184 third graders in one little class. We were stuck in there. So my friend says, hey, look, we can push people out. Tell them to run. Maybe some of us will survive. I said, okay. So we tell people to jump on the table. We push them outside. We said, run. Whatever happened, do not run. Do not wait for anyone. So run, keep running. Because the weather was so hot and it's burning so quickly, behind the school, there is mango trees that really touching the building. Just a lot of leaves and a lot of mangoes. So now they create this thick smoke as the building is burning. So, but because it was burning so fast, the ceiling began to collapse. My friend and I jump out as the last two people to get out after we only get about 15 kids out. The rest of them remain in the classroom and get burned. From there, I ran. We told ourselves we're not running together because we don't want to die together. If we run separately, maybe one of us will survive. I jumped in the water and I went parallel with water, and that was not by accident. I was taught that if somebody's chasing you with a spear or with a gun, jump in the water, go all the way until you touch the sand and go parallel with water. The majority of time, they will wait there thinking that you drowned, or by the time they realize that you'll be gone. And that's what I did. Every time I come up to take a breath, I make sure there's a branch of a tree or a grass. I'll take a breath and I go back and keep going. Probably about a quarter mile down the road, I came up. I sat on the sand, on the rock, and I began to look across the river, and I realized that there's no way to go because there's a small Wrangler Jeeps running back and forth, shooting at people, and behind me, I can hear people. There's a radio that is loud, and because I know the language, I know exactly what they're saying, where they need to go, so I begin to pay attention more. At this point, there is a small little plastic boat. I think you guys have them here. You blow it up and it becomes like a ball, and there's a little motors inside, and they run on water. And then I said, okay, they're gonna find me soon. So I found these 3 large rocks by the bank of the river, and there's sand between them. So I dig the sand out quickly, and I lower my little body in there, put the sand back on me, put mud on my face to make sure that I look like a rock, and they won't find me. So I stay there, and I thought maybe at night I will come out. No, I remained buried in the sand for 3 straight days. I did not eat or drink. At night, the sand will get really cold, and during the day will get warm. So the third day, that night, like about 5 a.m., there was a guy in the tree back up above me, and he began to talk on the radio. On the radio was, it says, hey, we should move toward the capital city where there's still a big resistance. So I said, maybe they will move soon. So I might have dozed off between 5 and 6. I'd fall asleep. So when I woke up, I listened. There's no voices. There's no tanks. There's nothing. It was silence. So I crawl out slowly, and I look around, down the river, up the river, there's nobody. So I went up to the bank of the river and look around carefully, there's nothing. These are not something that I came up with. That's how we were taught, because we grew up in a war. A lot of you were taught about fire when you were little, about looking both sides when you get out before you cross the street. That was the last thing in our mind. Things we were taught is war. How do you survive if you run into a lion on the way to school? If you get bitten by a snake, what do? Those are the things that we were taught, because I didn't know. The only car I ever saw is the car that bringing money for the teachers to get paid, and they go back, and 30 days later they will come back again. That's the only car I knew. So when I came out, I realized that they're gone. I need to make my way home to see if my mom and dad are still there. Normally, about a half a mile, when I look down under a mango tree, I will see my mother standing there looking down the road. She knows about what time I'm gonna get home. So while I was running, that was the image in my head, that I will see my mom soon. I will tell her exactly what happened in the school. But as I get closer, I realized that my mom is not there. When I get to the house, it was all burned down, and there's dead bodies everywhere. At this point, I began to cry. Probably the first time since I left the building, I didn't cry. I was determined to keep looking, because we were taught by our grandparents, if you cry during a war or during being chased by an animal, your tears will block you from seeing clearly. So you don't cry. You make sure you run. You make sure you pay attention. For the first time, I was in survival mode that I didn't cry. And I get home, the reality sink in, and realize all of my family are gone. And I dropped on my knees and I cried. And then while I was crying, a voice of my mother came into my head. 2 years earlier, when I started school, I came home one time and I started crying that I was hungry. And my mother sat me down and said, when you go to school, I'm your mom. I think about what you're gonna eat when you come home. You can't just arrive home and start crying. And that evening she told me, said, look, there is a war. Well, let me back up a little bit so you get a little background of me when I was my mom, younger brother, is the pastor of our church when I was growing up. So I grew up there. I sing in a choir with my mom and dad when I was little. So I thought that was good. But when this evening happened, when I really committed my life to Christ when I was little, my mother bought a necklace for me and put it around my neck. So this night when I cried, she sat me down, she said, look, Somalia next door is in war. And some of you, your parents probably know what happened in Somalia. That is about the exact same time when America was in Somalia fighting. Sudan is in the war. Ethiopia is in the war. If you come home one day and your dad and I are not here, and maybe possibly we're dead, what would you do that day? Would you sit around and cry? Or would you look for food yourself? Would you find a way to survive? So now, 2 years later, I'm sitting right here, everything is burned and bodies everywhere. That voice came back to me. And I said, this is what my mom said. So I got up, I ran to the forest, and I climbed a tree and I stayed there overnight. The reason I'm in the tree is because there's a lot of lions in Africa, if you don't know. Look it up, there's way too many lions and hyenas that can devour a child. So I stay in the tree. The next morning when I came down, I have to decide where to go. Where do I go? Do I stay here? Do I go to another country? But what country? Somalia next door is in the war. Sudan next door is in the war. Where do I go? So I decided that I want to go to Kenya, which is south of Ethiopia, but it's the furthest country than all three. I said I'm going to walk until I die. So I walked the first 3 days alone in the forest, and the fourth day I met with the Ethiopian Communist military that we just lost the war to the Ethiopian Democratic Party. And these guys are going to Kenya to become refugees. Hundreds of thousands of Ethiopian troops, probably about 300,000 of them, was in the forest trying to run. They've been chased by tanks and helicopters and military on foot. So they took me under their wings. They said, okay, you come with us. It was not easy because when I saw them, I thought they were the guys that would shoot at the school. So I ran away from them. When I ran away, one of them ran after me and to catch me. I tried to bite him. I tried to fight him off so he can let me go, but he didn't. He's a big, tall, 6'8" guy, and then holding me so tight. And then he sat me down and said, hey, look, we're not here to kill you. We just want to know where you're going. And I did not talk for a while. And then he looked at me, he took off his handgun and put it down and put up his big gun down there. He said, now you can talk to me, we're not going to kill you. So I talked to him. He said, while we were talking, he said, you're going to walk with us because there's hyenas and lions and everything else that can kill you. But if you are with us, it's better. So we began to walk together. The next 45 days, we've been chased by military on foot, military in helicopters, tanks, everything else you can think of. For hundreds of miles, they chased us into the border of Kenya and Ethiopia. When we arrived in Kenya, before we arrived in Kenya, I got really sick. Remember that when I went back to the school building, I took off my shoes. When I came out, I did not remember. So for the last 45 days, I was running without shoes. I kicked rocks, went through ice on the top of the mountains. If you think of Ethiopia, don't think about a desert. It's very mountains. There's a lot of mountains in Ethiopia, especially in the central part of Ethiopia. It's about 5,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level than any country around us. So I kicked rocks at night, and then my feet began to bleed. We went through the water, dirty water. They get infected, and I lost 9 of my toenails. I still don't have them. I'm glad that I'm alive. My friend goes like, your toenails look like raisins. I said, it's okay. I survived. That's all that matters to me. I don't care about it. I don't care about being pretty. I care about being alive. So we walk into, my friends, the guys that were with me, they decided that they wanted to stay with me, and I said, no, you will die if you stay with me. I can't walk. My knees are swollen. My ankles are swollen. I can't walk. They built a little fire. They took off. About 10 minutes later, the good guy that ran after me, first he came back, sat down and said, I'm not going to leave you behind while you're still living. I'm staying with you. About 20 more minutes later, the other 3 came back. They argue what to do with me. If this kid is going to die in a few days, why do we have to wait for him? So what they did was, this guy decided that, said, it's my own decision if I die with this kid, you guys can go on. But they did not go. About 5 days later, we were still in the same place. My knees got better, my ankles got better because they go to the forest, they cut down a tree, they put it in the fire, they will twist it, that as alcohol will come out of it, and they will burn my knees and my ankles with it. 5 days later, we walk. The only reason we survived for these 5 days, the border of Kenya is not that far. We walk into Kenya. The military waved us in. If you have a military clothes, they ask you to take it off. If you have a gun, they take it away from you. Now we become officially refugees. Then I went to a refugee camp in Kenya. For about almost a year later, I decided to go back to Nairobi. Anybody know what Nairobi is, the capital city of what country? Anyone? Of Kenya. So I went back to the street, to Nairobi. I became a street boy, what they call their street boy, for the next 4.5 years. Literally, I lived on the street, I ate from the garbage, I slept under bridges for 4.5 years before I was picked up by the Catholic Charity of Washington, D.C. as a foster child. When I was 14 years old, I was brought to Washington, D.C. and placed in a foster home. They really did a good job with me because I didn't know English. I was traumatized. They took me to every psychologist you can find. I went to school, let me tell you, I went to school, they took me to school as a 10th grader. Then, 1 hour later, I quit. Because I had no clue what the teacher was talking about. I didn't know English. It was social study class. I had no idea. They talked about the Bill of Rights or some other stuff. I still don't know today. So I quit. The teacher, my mom was called because I was crying at the school. I was terrified. They called the police of the school for me because they thought I just don't want to speak. I have long hair, okay? I have a big old afro, it's red, it's not been cut for 4 years. And the lady, the teacher, think that I was just one of the gang members from South Washington, D.C. They don't know how to talk to teachers. So they called the police on campus, on the school. They called the principal said, no, he's not a gang member or he don't want to speak to you. It was a new kid that was brought in this morning, he can't speak English. And I cried. So they called my foster family and they took me home. I told them I'm not going back to school. A few weeks later, a retired English teacher in my neighborhood, she decided that I'm going to teach you, but you have to promise me that you go back to high school a year from now. So if you can hear any words from me, it was only because of that teacher who's a retired volunteer to taught me how to read and write. I still don't think I know English more than the other 4 languages that I know. After I finished my sophomore year, I found out that I have my 3rd oldest brother survived the war and he was brought by Lutheran Social Services of Sioux Falls, South Dakota from Kenya. Thank you. So I found out from a guy in Washington, D.C. that one of my brothers was still living after a long conversation with him. So we called my brother. My brother picked up the phone, did not pick up the phone, and I left him a message. The next morning he called me back and said, look, you're not my little brother. My little brother got killed in an elementary school. I don't want to know your name or your mom and dad's name or any of your background. And he hung up the phone. That's the only thing he said. I was like, okay, this guy don't like me. But I'm going to call him back tomorrow. And I called. If you know my personality, I don't give up easily. It doesn't matter what you gave me. If I don't know, I'm going to figure it out. Or I'm going to ask somebody to help me out. So this guy is denying me that I'm not his brother. I'm going to call him tomorrow. So every week I call. Come back from school, I'll call him. He gets so angry that he will hang up the phone every time. About 3 weeks later, he said, hey, look, you're not my brother. I have you to come to Minnesota because he's moving to Minnesota at the time to go to University of St. Thomas. We met in Minnesota. He said, we'll meet in Minnesota and I'll send you back to Washington, D.C. because I know you're not my brother. I said, okay. So I came. I was on the plane. I was scared. This guy's mean. I don't want to meet him, but at the same time, he could be my brother. Remember? Well, you guys don't know. Your parents don't. But remember, you used to go all the way to the airport by the terminal and get your family from there when they get out of the flight. That's where my brother was. 1998, in June. I saw my brother first, and I knew exactly he was my brother, but he wouldn't recognize me. The last time he saw me, I was little. Now I grew big. So I took out my backpack, and I ran toward my brother. I was so overjoyed that my knees buckled up and I'd fall. And then I got up again, I fall down, and now we have all these people think that I was going crazy. So they called the police again. So now my brother realized, wait a minute. He walked over and looked at me, so he jumped on me on the floor. And we were just rolling around, and they thought we were more crazy to do that at the airport. But they didn't know that my brother and I just got reunited. I still don't know how I left the airport to get my brother's apartment. ask my brain, I think about it, I have no idea. I think I might have been passed out. I have no idea. I have no memory of anything else after that. That's how I moved to Minnesota. That's how I went to high school with Mary's nephew, named Steve. That's how I get to know Andy and the rest of the Ross's family. I spoke here, I think, almost 18 or 19 years ago. I spoke at this school. I came here with Andy. So that's how I moved to Minnesota. If you ask me to talk about my life or about me, we could be here until evening. I know way too many things that I went through or I know. So while I was attending Roseville Area High School, my senior year, I get good at running, like every Ethiopians do. If you know one of them that don't run, you let me know. I need to talk to them. We supposed to run, and I don't know why, where it came from. If you see Kenyans, we supposed to be running. I see people running on the street, my knees get numb that I want to go. So I decided that I want to run track. I get good at it. I ran the 451 seconds. Well, here comes my cousin who's a freshman beating me when I was a senior by 4 seconds. I get angry. So I said, nah, I'm not gonna go to school in the Twin City because he may graduate and come and join me there. So I went to Iowa State. While I was there, my cousin got depressed and killed his own kids in Duluth, Minnesota. I left college, came back to the Twin City because his younger brother cannot live without me if he's not there, so I decided to come home. I said I'm not going back to college, I'm going to stay with him. He's going to 10th grade until he graduates. The same thing exactly my brother and his brother did for me. When they found me, they said, okay, we're going to quit college, we're not going to go to St. Thomas, we're going to work, he's going to go to school, until he's done, we'll go back to college. So when I came back, I said, you're going to go to school regardless of what happened. When you're done, we'll go back to school together. At that time, Bethel decided they accept me to go to school so that I'll be closer to home. Then on, I think it's 2000, that we found out that my uncle, who was a pastor in Ethiopia, he was still living. So 2 a.m. Minneapolis time. This would be the little stories that I want to tell you before I open it up for you to ask me questions. We called the Ethiopia church. We asked for my uncle, and they said he was gone. He went home for lunch. So I called the house. I told the secretary to give me the phone number, and then I called the house. A lady picked up the phone and said, your uncle is eating lunch with guests, so you can turn up the phone. Our culture, if any adult or parents are eating and you pick up the phone, you're not supposed to give it to them if there's company in the house. So I argued with this lady and said, you know, I'm calling long distance, I need to talk to my uncle. She said no. She seriously don't want to let me talk to my uncle. So I get angry. I said, lady, what is your name? And she said her name, and it was my mother. And then I can still cry right now, literally. And I yell out and say, Mom! And there's this long silence, because she was confused that, who is calling me Mom somewhere else? Because my mom has funeral for me 10 years earlier. My brother and I has gravesite that without a body in it that my mom did back in Ethiopia. So she knew that because there's no DNA test, the kids who died in elementary school, I was one of them in her mind. And I said, Mom, this is your youngest son, Obed. And the next thing I knew, she clapped on the kitchen floor. Now my uncle, my dad, and whoever was eating there, they ran over, picked up my mother. My dad grabbed the phone because they can hear me saying hello, hello. So he listened, he said, who is this? I talked to my father. He didn't believe me. 20 minutes later, he asked me, he said, if you're my son, tell me a story that you and I only know. I said, okay. Because I'm the youngest child of 7, I get more time with my dad when everybody went to school. So I love going fishing with my dad. I love going honey hunting with my dad. So I told him, I said, remember we used to go fish? I'm gonna tell you a story. My dad is 7'2". He's 300 pounds, over 300 pounds. You think these Africans are skinny? My dad was a lot bigger. So he sits on one side of the canoe. I sat on the top of the canoe because the canoe would sit like this. So because he's so heavy, I would be on the top of the canoe fishing. And he would tell me stories about him and his dad. They used to do the same thing. And so I told him that story. He said, that is my son. There's no one on earth should know those stories. So I waited until 2010. Remember, I left Ethiopia in 1991. 2010, 19 years later, I decided to go home to see my mom and dad. At this time, I was working with the human rights in Washington, D.C. for 2 years. With the UN, I went all the way to Geneva. And I become the top 10 most wanted people in Ethiopia, but I still went. Call me crazy, I'm really crazy a little bit, semi-crazy. So I went to Ethiopia knowing that I was wanted. I flew to another country and walked across from Sudan into Ethiopia to my village. I arrived there for 4 days. 4 days later, the government found out that I was in town, and when I was traveling on road in a car, they pulled us over. I was arrested, transported to federal prison about 700 miles away from where my mom lived. My mom didn't know where I was, if I was killed. For 32 days, she had no idea where I was. Until later, for some reason, I got out of the jail. The United States, Great Britain, all they negotiated with the Ethiopian government for me to be released because I was waiting to be hung in my own country. I was released to the British, I was released to the American, and who handed me over to the British Embassy, put me on the airplane, British Airways to London, and I was brought back to the United States. So I did a lot of crazy stuff in my life, and I'm still doing some crazy stuff. I'm passionate about international human rights issues. The children my age was killed so many times, women, and as far as I know, every person on earth is brought to this earth by a woman. And for some reason, women are the most abused people around the world. By men they give birth to. That usually, if people love their mother as much as I do love mine, they should not abuse another woman who has children as well. Because if I love mine, I should not abuse yours. Because I know the pain that when mine was abused or in prison so many times, the pain it caused me is greater. I should apply that to you. That's usually but I think crazy anyway, so people don't listen to me as much, besides young kids like you. So I will stop and have you ask me questions. If you ask me questions, you will get a lot out of me. December 7th, I'll be 39 years old. I thought I would be turning 40 this year, but my mother said, no, you were not born in 1981. You were 10 pounds, 3 ounces when you were born. I exactly know that day. You were born December 7th, 1982. Not 81, but I thought I was 81 the whole time. So, ask me questions. Go ahead.
Why were you on the wanted list in Ethiopia?
The United States is friends with Ethiopia because they wanted to fight the war on terror. So, the United States become friends with Ethiopia, give them a lot of money and weapons to control Somalia for them. Ethiopia has the second largest population on the continent of Africa. Nigeria has over 200 million people, and Ethiopia has 114 million. But Ethiopia has the largest military power. And oh, by the way, for your own history lesson, Ethiopia is the only country on the continent of Africa that was not colonized by any Western power. We fought for 60 years for British not to invade us or Italians. So we have this culture of war and fighting, So the United States said, hey, can you help us? We'll give you this much money. So when they abused their own people in Ethiopia, I went and testified at the Senate how Ethiopia was abusing their own people, that we should not give them money. So me and other group of people, we began to lobby with the American government, and then in 2007, they cut the funding to Ethiopia by $750 million. At that time, we only gave them $1 billion a year, but cutting money to one of these countries, you become the bad dog, that we're gonna hunt you down. If you step foot in our country, we're gonna kill you, because money is what they need from the US. So when I testified, then I become wanted there, because the funding was cut. That's a good question. Anybody else? I know you have a lot of questions.
Want to go back to class?
Don't you? Okay, let me ask you something. Is anything I told you right now, is anything similar to your life, or in your city, or in your class, in your school, anything similar at all that you think, oh, that is something kind of related to us, or completely different? You don't walk to school, do you? Unless you live across the street. You have some buses or cars. Didn't have any of those. Yes.
Did you ever find out what happened to your friend?
That is a good question. Okay. When I went to Ethiopia in 2010, he looked like 20 years older than me. He has a big beard. He has a whole bunch of kids. And then he has a big farm. So I saw him. So there's two of my best friends. They're twins. And then we lived next to each other. So one of them had died. The other one survived, the one that got out with me. So he is still living. I was reunited with him. He lived in the same village as my mom, the same place where we grew up. They moved a little bit, but they're still there, and they're farmers. So they have a lot of corn there. Someone else.
Do you know what happened to the people? Who won the war?
Okay, that's good. Well, let me just bring it to you. This would be a good lesson for you, for your class. During the 80s, ask your parents when you go home. There's something called in America, it's Cold War. What you don't know, people really don't know what Cold War was about. The Soviet Union tried to keep as many countries in the eastern part of the world, including Africa, as a communist countries. The United States tried to keep as many of those countries as a democratic countries. So these two big giant countries, when they do this, the people that are affected the most by the Cold War is us. In Afghanistan, the Soviet was there, the United States paid Osama bin Laden that turned around and killed us. We paid him $40 million a year to fight the Soviet in Afghanistan, when he was our friend. Then Ethiopia has a president that was educated at the University of Maryland in the 60s. In 1961, he transferred to University of Georgia to get his master's degree. Guess what was happening in Georgia in 1961, 62, 63? Dr. King movement, the civil rights movement was going on at the same time. That, to him, was the America. So when he graduated, he went back home. When he became the president of the country, he said, well, America don't like black people. I saw it in Atlanta. So I'm not going to be friends with them, so I'm going to go to Moscow. So the guy who were educated here, the American Trust, now is allied with Moscow. Not because something was done, just his experience in Atlanta didn't want to do anything with America. And the United States goes, okay, you actually educated here and you don't like us, we're going to come after you. There was an Ethiopian guy who was getting his education at Harvard University. He became the leader. The US gave him money in Sudan, trained the military to fight the Soviet Union government, supported government led by the guy that was educated in the United States. This was the civil war that I went through. So in some ways, in a weird way, we were connected somehow, that where your country wanted my country to be democratic, and Russia wanted my country to be communist. So that was the struggle that I went through. So in 1991, what happened then? The Soviet economic began to collapse. So they can't support the government in my country. The United States economy was greater, it's getting better, and they were able to support rebels. 1991, they took over the country. Those are the guys that are still in power right now. That's just a long answer to your question. But that was what happening. The government in my country right now is placed there by the United States, called the Ethiopian Democratic Front. The democratic governments you have in this country don't really work in so many countries, because there's cultural differences, there's religious differences. So we have it, it's just by name, but they don't function as the democratic government we have in the United States. I say something against the government, I should be arrested. Do you know my biggest fear was when I learned English when I came here? I love to watch a late night show, a guy named called Jay Leno. I love his jokes. So he made fun of Bill Clinton. I was terrified, so I went to the room, I said, Mom, would that guy still live tomorrow? And the next day it would be on television. That was the craziest thing I ever thought that happened in America. You make fun of the president, you should be dead tomorrow in my country. That's why we're not as democratic as you. So good question. Anyone else? Go ahead.
So you saved 15 children out of 180, right? Or roughly? Okay.
Yes.
So did you ever see any of those 15 children ever? They were your classmates at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever run across any of those people ever again?
I saw a few of them. If I stayed free in Ethiopia, I could have, because some of them become teachers. They're teaching in different locations. So to get to me was a little bit of a challenge. But if I stayed there a bit longer, I could have seen them. By the way, I am planning to leave the United States on December 6th to go to Ethiopia. So you could be hearing more news about me when I get there from Mary. So right now, I wanted to go to see my mother. She turned 71 this year, and she has leprosy. So I've been wanting to go to spend time with her, but she's still telling me that don't come. I'll give you the green light when I think it is safe enough for you to come. Yeah.
You're still wanted?
No, I'm not. Here is a crazy one. You think my life is crazy. It's gonna get crazier when I tell you this story. So I moved from Minneapolis to New York City and worked for an hotel. So I work at the front office in Times Square. Right before COVID in 2019, I was relocated to Seattle. So I work at one hotel in downtown that has almost 1,000 rooms. So I'm one of the supervisors at the front desk, and I go to school at the University of Washington. We get a call, literally, this is not something I make up, it's crazy. We got a call from Bill Gates Foundation and said, is anyone in this hotel to speak Ethiopian? Well, the girl said, my supervisor does. They hand me the phone. The lady goes, hey, in 45 minutes, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia will be arriving at your door. Can you welcome him, since you know the language? I said, no problem, I'll do it. But I didn't connect the dot. It's the same guy who put me in jail in Ethiopia. So I went to the door, the limousine came up, all this Secret Service and police came by. I shake his hand, we greet one another, his wife next to him, his security, and then his secretary. So now I walk them through the lobby to the elevators, so I have to lock the elevator so nobody else will get in. Take him up, put him in his presidential suite, I give him my card, tell him my name, and they look at his wife and said, you're not Obeng Okello from Gambela, are you? I said, yeah, it's me. And then his eyes get big, and my eyes get big. I said, oh, you're the one who put me in jail. We talk, he goes, sit down. We talk. And then he told the secretary to book a dinner with me the next day. For 3 days straight, I ate dinner with this guy every day. And I found out that he just resigned, somebody else taken over the country. I found out that he converted his life to Christ. We prayed together. I have his cell phone now, his wife's cell phone, and his daughter's cell phone, and his security cell phone. Now in my phone. Out of the blue, a phone call changes everything else. So now he said, when you come to Ethiopia, my son is going to pick you up in my car and no one will touch you. Sue, Mary's sister, she goes, I don't really trust him. If you get in his car, he could take you somewhere and kill you. I said, no, I communicated with him. And then he went home and saw my mom and my sibling. He took pictures and sent it to me. Said, hey, I went and saw them, just to let you know that you don't have to be afraid of me. So that's part of my crazy life. I ran into some people that you have no idea how I met people everywhere I go. And I don't know why I keep running into people. Anyone else? Yes. My soldier friend, when we arrived in Kenya, any of you here know a terrorist group called Al-Shabaab? Anybody know? Mm-hmm. It's a terrorist group that's located in East Africa and Somalia. When we were in Kenya as refugees, we lived in the desert, so in a tent. So this guy, my friend, somebody came and he went out to collect some firewood. Somebody tried to kill him and stabbed him so many times, but he survived. The reason he was stabbed, because when he was in Ethiopia, he has a high-ranking military, and then they're trying to kill him. So the Kenyan government and the United Nations took him away from me and hid him somewhere in the city. And a few years later, I found out that he was taken by the Australian government. Now he lived in Sydney. I spoke with him on the phone. We have not met in person yet, so I look forward to that day, so he can tell me more stories about me. Every now and then I'm surprised, and when my mom said something, I said, I used to be like that? Yeah, I'm a little crazy when I was little. I have a mohawk. My dad cut my hair as a mohawk. I fight in school a lot. I was not a bully, but when boys try to make fun of my cousins who are girls, I get in the middle and try to fight them. That's always been I was younger than them, but I'm always the protector. I was a fat little kid, I loved to fight back. Anyone else?
When you first reunited with your brother, what did you think? Like, how different did he look from the last time you saw him?
His face looked like my mother. I looked like my dad. If my dad would walk by, you don't have to be told he's my father. You would know. I looked exactly like him. I got home, he has a gray beard, and I said, boy, 30 years from now, I look like him. I'm exactly like my dad, but my brother looked like my mother. And when I saw him, it didn't change. It was not a question in my mind that he was my brother. The question was, would he recognize me at the time? But I knew he was my brother as soon as I saw him, because of my mom. Anyone else?
Did all the refugees come to America, or where did they all go when you were in Kenya?
Oh, I think it is about 1% of the refugees were taken from Kenya to here. Anybody heard of a documentary called The Lost Boys of Sudan? Anyone knows? You heard of it? Yeah. When I was in Kenya, there's about 300,000 South Sudanese. There's about 1 million people from Rwanda and Burundi, 1 million more from Somalia and Ethiopia, and we were all in Kenya. Kenya is the smallest country we have in East Africa, and I don't know how they accommodated all of us. But I was told that about 1% of those people made it here. The people that who made it to the United States, Australia, Sweden, and Canada are those who are over 18. It took me longer to find a way to come here because I was younger. I have to have a parent who agreed to sponsor me to live with them. But if you are 18, they bring you up as a group, you get a job, they give you an apartment, and you work. But about only 1%. There are people in the camp today who are 30 years old that were born in the refugee camp, and they never know what a home is. They're still living in the tent. I am. My mother, she passed away with cancer, but I still get in touch with my grandmother. She is 93 years old. She's outside of Washington, D.C. My two sisters, one of them become a doctor. She is in Nigeria, specialized in HIV and AIDS. And the other one is a stay-at-home mom, married to a military guy. They live in Germany.
Why do you think Kenya is so open to accepting refugees from its neighboring countries?
You got the good question, really good. This is gonna be, if you don't know anything else that I said, learn about this. Because in about 10 years, you guys could be the one that's changing the world for the better, hopefully. That question that he asked is very dear to my heart, that if I ever graduate from graduate school, that's what I would do. Why did Kenya accept refugees, that many? Even Ethiopia right now, there is almost over 1 million refugees from Yemen, from Sudan, from Somalia, even some of them from Syria. Refugees become a very lucrative business for some of these countries. And let me explain to you why. Ethiopia will ask the world for money, billions of dollars, that they have the capability to take care of refugees. But those billions of dollars are only pocketed by a few people in the top of the government. So let me give you an example. Ethiopia is a big country. Next door there's South Sudan. There's a country called South Sudan, has about maybe 12 million people in it. And instead of helping them for that problem to be better, there's people who are really supporting the others, so the war will keep going on in South Sudan. So the refugees will run to Ethiopia, so the United States and other countries will give us money to take care of those refugees. So that's a huge revenue for Kenya and for Ethiopia, and I hope that there's moral leaders who will say what we're doing is wrong. We're eating and feeding our children for the cost or the pain of others across the border in that country. But they should also be helping that country and reorganize and get the leaders together in that country to make it better so that these refugees will go back to their country. But guess how long the refugees of Sudan has been in Ethiopia? 1956, there has been refugees from Sudan to Ethiopia. When the British was fighting Sudan, the Sudanese were fighting the British to get their independence on January 20th, 1956. Refugees went to Ethiopia. They've been coming there ever since. Even though they won their independence from British, there is what they call the Northern Sudan Sharia law, the Islamic government. In the north and the south, there's Christians. As soon as the British left, the war became between Islam and Christians. So we have refugees literally since 1956 in Ethiopia, and imagine how much revenue Ethiopia has collected over the years. That is the reason why they take a lot of refugees.
This is a little bit different subject, but could you talk a little bit about your experience as an immigrant and as a black person in the United States? You have some good stories, positive and negative.
Yeah, I will tell you my life. This is something that's very dear to me. My life in the United States. What is it like for me? So let me out of high school. When I went to Roseville area high school, when I come to lunchroom, kids will move away from my table. So before you know it, I'm eating alone. I didn't know why people were leaving. Maybe they were scared of me. Maybe I didn't know English. So I decided not to eat lunch. I said, these people don't like me. I'm not gonna go to lunch. I'm just gonna go to school. That's why I always encourage high schoolers to say, hey, if you see somebody new, reach out to them. It's important. Instead of everybody walk away from them, just reach out and say, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Maybe you learned something. So what happened is I quit school. I quit lunch. So I stayed in the study hall for 3 months, and my teacher, the study hall teacher, realized that this kid is not eating. During lunch, he's always here. So and instead of talking to me, she talked to my English teacher. English as a second language. All of us were refugees in that class. Said, can you have an assignment to have them write about their feeling, how they feel being in the United States? As soon as this assignment came out, my goodness, did I learn how to write quick. All these emotions, just write on paper, that kids in Roseville, they don't like me. When I go to lunch, they move, and all of this, I wrote it and turned it in. My teacher read it and pulled me aside the next day and said, do you mind if I edit your paper and give it to the school newspaper? I said, it's okay, you can do it. So she edited it and gave it to the school newspaper. When it came out, there's a whole bunch of kids looking for me in the hallway. 2 of them, still my friends today, named Jake Nyberg and Jana Nyberg. They're brothers and sisters. They gave me a hug. They said, hey, we didn't know that you knew. From now on, we'll let you know that we're going to eat with you. From there, I made a lot of friends through that. When I went to college, there was a group of kids who were recruited by a KKK group in Minneapolis to kill all the minority students at Bethel University. It's a Baptist school. So what they did was they put bullets on my car at night and write me a note calling me a monkey, we're gonna kill you if you don't do. What they did was, we're gonna kill all the minorities, but we're gonna start with a big tall one. And guess how many of us were there? Out of 4,000 kids, there's 18 of us, all Asian, Latino, and African American. The total of 18 on the entire campus. So when I came out in the morning and saw the notes on my car and bullets, I reported that to the police and the school administration. As soon as I reported to the police, they took pictures, they hit the television wave in the evening like you never know. And imagine something bad goes in a Christian school. Oh, that was a big news in the Twin City. So they reported it. And then at 3 a.m. the next day, they came to my dorm. They said, you have to get on the bus, you go, we're gonna take you to the hotel. I look at the president of school, I said, absolutely not. I'm not going nowhere. They have every colored person on the bus already. Just 2 of us remain. Me and my roommate, and there's 3 of us in the room. 2 black guys and white guy from Iowa. We call him our Jesus. He have a long hair. So, and our dormitory, what we did is we put my bed up here. We put the white guy in the middle and the other black guy down there. We call it Oreo room. So he could sleep in the middle. We had a lot of fun. So he grabbed the baseball bat. He told the president of school, said, look, if somebody come here to kill these guys, I'm gonna die first. They're not going anywhere. And I told the police, I said, look, for sure, it doesn't matter what you do. I'm not leaving. You guys just better go and take the rest of the people. In the morning, the television were like, who is this kid not afraid to die? Every radio station on the Twin City. All of the people have moved to the hotel, but he refused. So I woke up to go to class. There's about 12 television stations just stationed outside trying to talk to me. I said, hey, I have to go to class. I can't talk when I come back. Go to class, there's a police following me there. Come back to my dorm, they're following me. So I sat down for an interview with these televisions. So I told them, I said, look, the very people I love the most is the KKK guys. And they look at me and said, what? I said, yeah. Unless they told me they don't like me, I know where they stand. But I don't like people who are racist that I prayed with, eat with, and worship with. That's what hurt me the most. These are the people who will hurt me the most. But the KKK, they already told me I would sit down and have dinner with them and talk out about our differences. Because they don't like me, I know where they stand. Oh boy, did the television went crazy and the radio. So they decided that they want to do a documentary about me, WCCO. So they did in the background, asked all the people, my family and everybody else, and do you know where the Wheel of Fortune is at 6:30 in the evening? They knocked that out and put me right there. Out of the worst thing you can think of, it turned out positive to a lot of people in the Twin City. So those are some of the things that I get pulled over when I was walking by a cop in Roseville. He get mad because I told him, I asked him, I said, if I was walking too fast, handcuffed me, put me in the back of the car. I called my youth pastor, he came in really mad at the police and get me out of there and took me home. Every now and then I get in trouble, but here's the good one. One day, I think it was 2005, I get out, I have a little ugly Jeep, 1996 Jeep Grand Cherokee. The muffler is loud. Went to the gas station, washed it really nice, picked up a newspaper, and went back home. Sat in my apartment, I was reading, in the sports section said, all the NBA celebrities are in the Twin Cities playing golf for inner city kids. I was like, how much is that? And I looked and it was $10. I said, I'll go. Look at the list of the celebrities that are playing golf. On the top is Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Scottie Pippen, Kevin Garnett, all of the people that I idolized for years. I'm gonna go see them. Drove there, put my Timberwolf hat on, Timberwolf t-shirt. I was driving to Maple Grove. I get to the gate, there's two gates, and there's police over there's two over there, and the other two standing in the middle. So I rolled down my window, they came to my window, they look at me and say, hey, are you looking for your people? Out of fear, I said, yeah. But I didn't know why I said yeah. I don't even know who my people were. So they opened the gates for the players, went in there, parked my little ugly car between all these Ferraris and Hummers. I said, I'm not gonna blow my cover, I'm gonna be here. So I stay there. I said, isn't this great? The police think that all black people look alike. So I stayed there, sat on the bench. Scottie Pippen came over, sat next to me. Hey man, where do you play ball? I said, I don't play ball nowhere. I play at the park. So we talked and he asked me all about Africa, about all the safaris and animals. He fell in love with our conversation. He said, you want to sit on my cart? We ride around together. From about 1 p.m. in the afternoon until 5 p.m. I was riding around with Scottie Pippen because the police made a mistake. Thought that I was one of those players. And then at the evening, Scottie goes, hey, are you coming to the party? I said, no, what party? He goes, there's a party after this. I said, I don't have tickets. He said, wait right here. So he went to the event manager, picked up 4 VIP tickets. He said, you go home, you have to put on a tie though. They won't let you in. Went home, I was riding fast, literally fast. Calling my friend Dave, said, dude, we have to ask some girls out. Like, what's the day? We're gonna go to these parties that where Michael Jordan was. He goes like, dude, you don't have to lie to me. We can just go out. I said, okay. So I called my friend Carla. I said, hey girl, you wanna go out? And I know. I'm a shy guy usually when it comes to dating. And Carla goes like, she played volleyball for the University of Alabama. She's a tall girl. She goes like, oh man, if you have a crush on me, wanna ask me out, you don't have to bring Michael Jordan in. You can just tell me that we'll go somewhere. I was driving Dave and Carla. They didn't believe me that there's a party with Michael Jordan. Until we get to the door, the event manager came out. There's a line of fans outside. He goes, hey, so Ben Kelly here. I said, here I am. And she goes, go in the back of the hotel and enter from there. And Dave walking around like his jaw was dropping. That's Michael Jordan and his wife, Kevin Garnett, and Kirby Puckett, who was our favorite baseball player, was there. So we went. For the first time in my life, until that time, I had a drink, a champagne paid for by Michael Jordan. I said, I want to taste what his money sounds like. So I drank a little bit of some champagne. I was sweating like a dog all night. So that was one of the crazy mistakes. Every time people look at my Facebook and say, hey, is that a Photoshop? Is that really Scottie Pippen and you standing there? I said, it's real. That's Scottie Pippen. So, but that was just out of blue mistake. Police think that I look like one of the guys. Yeah. Anyone else? I don't want to bore you out.
You've been through so many challenges. What do you think are your most important character traits to get through those?
I have sort of more patience than a lot of people. I don't get rattled up quickly. And part of that is we were taught if you run into a lion or something, don't get rattled up. They're gonna get eaten. So stay calm. So in recent months, I was caught at Walgreens. Well, I should say the name, but the Walgreens manager grabbed me and pushed me that I stole a bleach. I was buying soap. She thought that I didn't pay for the bleach. So she grabbed me at the door. I'm 6'5". The lady is about 5'2". I could just walk, and she won. But I said, "Lady, what do you want?" I said, "You stole that." I said, "I didn't." So we argued. Police was called. I went back, showed the receipt. All I did was put the money back in my card and put your products back. I'm not going to buy them. The police feel bad that they would call for that. So I said, I'm going to go home. They said, "Do you want to press any charges?" I said, "No, but I wanted to write a letter to the corporate office." So at church, they asked me, because everybody knew, I posted on Facebook. At church, they asked me, said, "Why do you think," the same question, "why do you act in the face of something bad? Why do you like cool down and not rattle up?" The only thing I could think of was engineers knows that when they construct the building, they know how much weight that building can take. In my case, I think my God prepared me, gave me a lot of strength that all this weight, I can carry them. He trusts me with trouble. And I wish all of these things that we see in America with racial inequality and all this stuff, I tell people I wish it happened to me only, because I know how to carry that weight. Some people will break down. Some things that I carry, a lot of people will not be able to. I'm probably the most blessed person and the happiest person that I ever know. There's nothing bothers me much. There's people who don't like you. My dad said, it's only when the negative come to your life, if you look hard enough, there's always a positive thing next to it. Just pick up the right one. That's what I was taught when I was little. Anyone else?
We have another one up here.
Yes.
I know this is kind of out of place now, but how big was Michael Jordan's hand?
Mine is look like a little. I thought I had big hands usually. It's bigger than anything else I ever. I mean, his hands roll around my hand just to grab him, to shake his hand. His shoes are wrapped around. And I shaved my head because of Michael Jordan. When I was in high school, I wanted to play like him. I stick my tongue out when I go play a layoff. Everything when I was a child, I idolized this man, and to be in the same room. And years later, we met again, and I met his mother. And I was in Hollywood with my friend who made movies. And Miss Jordan was there, and she was doing a movie about Michael Jordan. And I said, "Ma'am, I'm a big fan of your son, except I'm a little shorter than him." Yeah, he's huge, big.
Was going through the immigration process for you difficult, or being you were a refugee, was it fairly easy to get through all the steps that?
It was easier for a child, but for adults it was not easy. But when I say easy, it's not that easy either. Number one, they have to test you with all this disease that before you're allowed to come to the United States. HIV was one of them. In the 90s, you're not allowed to enter the United States if you have HIV. But we were not tested because we were kids, but for adults, it was a rigorous test that they have to go through. The only problem on my migration coming here was because of my dark skin, I was put down as a Sudanese. Years later, for me to become a US citizen, my birth certificate was sent from Ethiopia, and I'm Ethiopian. So it created a long battle for years that the lawyer in Nairobi just put me down as Sudanese because I'm darker than the rest of Ethiopians. Oh boy, I wish I knew English then. I can't talk to him now. And they said, because he made a statement said, Ethiopians are not dark skinned and they're light skinned. Oh boy, I would have asked him, I said, what color is the United States? You have all these shades of color, so you shouldn't, and I think you don't know history. The Africans, they were moved all over Africa during slavery. There's people named Obeng in Ghana, in West Africa. That's 8 hours away by flight. How did Oban get to Ghana? So the history that people don't know usually, the one thing that I will encourage you not to do, don't see some Africans and say, hey, you look like you're from Senegal because you've been to Senegal. Because they may look Senegalese, but they don't never been there. So there's a movement of people during slavery that hundreds and thousands of them moved to different coasts to be taken into slavery. And when the world said there's no more slavery, they did not go back to where they come from. They remained on the coastal area of African continent. So there's a lot of movement. Plus, Ethiopia has a large Jewish country in Ethiopia, more than any country that I can think of in Africa, maybe outside of Israel. Do you know, anyone know the story, how we get the Jews in Ethiopia? Anyone want to take a crack at it? In 950 BC, there was a queen of Ethiopia who traveled to Jerusalem to visit King Solomon. She had an affair with him, have a child in Ethiopia. She sent a message to King Solomon that I'm in a war, I've been attacked. If you don't care about me, how about the only seed of Israel that I gave birth to? And then King Solomon sent troops to Ethiopia, who intermarried with Africa and never made it back to Israel and become Ethiopian. Today, a lot of people don't know. Ethiopia is very old compared to your country. Go ahead.
Can you say anything more about the process of becoming a U.S. citizen for you and what that was like?
It's a test that I actually think is probably the easiest test you can take, even though a lot of people, but I found out that my friends who are Americans, they have no clue what that test was. So, when you become a citizen, you go through the process of taking a test. Number one, you apply, you pay the money, and then they give you a test. That test cannot, maybe it's changed now, but it cannot be translated to you in your language. It has to be in English. So some of the questions that on this test I still know said, who was the first president of the United States? Who is the 16th president of the United States? What are the 3 branches of government of the United States? The easiest thing that you can think of. But because people learn it in 3rd and 4th grade, they kind of forget by the time they're in college. But those are the things that you have to do. Once you pass that and your background, you don't have any arrest in your background in recent years. If you were caught with drugs, you have to wait 7 years before you become a citizen in the United States. If you were caught driving a car while drunk, you have to wait at least 5 or 7 years before you become a United States. So all of these in your background has to be clear before you become a U.S. citizen. How do I know that? I have a cousin who was crazy enough, drove his car, got pulled over by the police, ran away from the police. That went in his record. He just became a citizen 7 years after 7 years. So he was waiting for a long time. Anyone else? I have 2 questions in the back that I'm going to answer for you in a little bit. They're going to ask me.
We have one over here.
Yes.
Whatever happened to that school? Like, did they replace the school?
No. They have a school now, but there has been wars also that kids are not going to school in my country, in my village right now. So they rebuilt the school. It's about 30 years old, but it's really not sufficient, not good enough for kids to learn. It's not been renovated. There's no books. In fact, I decided to start a school in my country about, maybe 10 years ago now, 11 years ago, that my school does better, that if we go to school about 5 months a year, the school is sitting over there and the government is not doing anything. We ask them if I can use it and hire some teachers, and that school has been doing a little better than the government school. So there's not really a lot of schooling there. I'll come down to you. You have another one over there. Go ahead.
You mentioned before that you can speak more than English and Ethiopian. So what other languages can you speak?
I speak One is my tribal language. There is a tribe called Luo, L-O-U. Also, in Ethiopia, they're known as the Anuak. So Luo is about 11 million people, but they're divided in 4 different countries. We fought the British, and they decided that if we keep this tribe together, they're gonna take over your country. They talk about the Ethiopian king. They told Ethiopian king, if we don't divide these guys, they're gonna take over your country. They're too strong. So what they agree, some of us remain in Ethiopia, some in Sudan, some in Kenya, some in Uganda, some in Tanzania. So I know that. Have any of you seen the movie called Lion King? Do you know the language they speak? A few words in that language? There's a language called Swahili. That's the language I speak in Kenya. Remember one of the characters named Rafiki? Remember that one? Do you know what Rafiki means? Friend. That's the translation of Rafiki in English. Friend is Rafiki. So that's what the language. And the 2 other languages that I learned in Ethiopia. Amharic is the national language of Ethiopia. It's a mix of Hebrew and Africans. So that's one of the oldest languages in Ethiopia. You can see a manuscript written about 3,000 years ago in Ethiopian language. If you learn about the history of religion, Ethiopia is known as to have the Ark of the Covenant. And the reason is there because when Israelis go out to fight, they carry the Ark of the Covenant in front of them first, and the last war that Israel ever fought outside of Israel was in Ethiopia. And they think the Ark of the Covenant is there. We have churches that are more than 2,000 years old in Ethiopia. There's one person down here, and do you have another question? Yes.
Do they have a memorial at the school, like when the school burned down to the lives that were lost?
No, they don't have any memorial over there. What they're trying to do is they don't do a memorial for those because they wanted to deny that they did not kill that many people. That's what happened right now. In 2003, the Ethiopian government militia went out in my village and killed more than 1,000 males only on Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon. That was a target killing. That's what they think is the ethnic cleansing, because if you kill the males only, you capture the women and take them, and that tribe would be wiped out, because when they get children, it will be a different tribe. So that is still some of the things that is taking place today. So, yeah, somebody went down here.
Yes, so my question is your brother a American citizen? And then do you also still have any kind of citizenship to Ethiopia, and do you guys ever plan to return?
My brother is a fully American citizen now, and his kids were born here. I am not a U.S. citizen yet, because I have to get a paper from Ethiopia in addition to my birth certificate that I'm Ethiopian, so that they can take out the Sudanese that was written on my documents. Because I really don't like to have an American citizen that's thinking that I'm from Sudan. I never been there. I only been there when I was little. So, because the government in Ethiopia didn't like me, they didn't want to write the letter. But now I have the inside people. Hopefully when I come back, I'll become a U.S. citizen.
So do you have any plans to ever go back?
Yep, December 6th this year, that I will be flying into Ethiopia, I hope.
Can you talk about like the refugee camp? Like if you go to school there, do you ever have a chance to go to college or leave the refugee camps or?
No.
I didn't think so.
No. Here is what my life was like in the refugee camp. Just to give you a little clue. The only thing that I learned in the refugee camp was how to play darts and how to play checkers. That's the only thing I did in the camp. There's nothing else. No schools, nothing. Our daily life revolved around getting water, getting firewood from the bushes, and cook. And if you're lucky, you play a little soccer. We put grass together, the dry grass, we pull them together in a circle, and we put it in the socks and tie them up real good, and we made it a soccer. And when we say dart, it's not a real dart. It's some guys that would just draw it on a cardboard and has little sticks that we throw. That's what we did. For checkers, we go to the UN, they drink beer over there, so we get the beer caps, we make it into checkers. There's no school. There's, right now, in the same camp where I used to be, there's still more than 300,000 people. And kids who were born there, like I said, they just turned 30 and they've never been to nobody's school.
Obing, can you tell us what's going on in your area of Ethiopia right now? And is there anything Americans can do about it?
Okay, that's good. If you don't mind, I'm going to record that question so that I have it on my video. There is a lot right now. I'm going to give this to Karina. I'm going to record this for myself so that you know. What I'm about to tell you, even though you're young in this country, you can do something very little to change the situation in Ethiopia. I'm not kidding. Just one thing, there's something very little I'm going to tell you. None of you will not be in it, so this is going to focus on me. Don't be afraid. I'm going to give it to you, you'll figure it out. There you go. The question is, what is going on in Ethiopia right now? As we speak, what is going on there? Yesterday morning, I received a phone call at 7:30 in the morning that a young girl who was 16 was killed, and she's related to me by marriage. Her dad is my brother-in-law. This girl grew up in my house. She was walking with other people her age. They're walking down in the evening. They were chased. She was captured, raped, beaten, and cut her throat off and left her on the streets yesterday, right before I went to church. So what is happening in that area now? Where I lived, like I said, we live in the border of Sudan and South Sudan. So there's a war in Sudan. The majority of people came into Ethiopia as refugees, but they brought their weapons. So there's thousands of weapons in the city that illegally been brought into the country. So Egypt, who is in a disagreement with Ethiopia right now over the Nile River, decided to pay some of these guys from South Sudan to start the proxy war in my village, in my area, so that Ethiopia will stop building the dam on the Nile. 80% of the water in the Nile come from Ethiopia. The agreement that was signed by British in 1902, Ethiopia was not on the table, at the table, when that agreement was signed between Egypt, Sudan, and South Sudan now. So Ethiopia then wanted to build a dam to use it for electricity, and Egypt said, you're going to reduce the water on the river, and we're not going to survive. That went to the World Court. Ethiopia seemed to be winning that, and Egypt decided to say, okay, we have to start a proxy war. By using the South Sudanese refugees who are poor, you give them a poor person $10,000, they will kill anybody, especially those who've been traumatized by war. So there's still a lot of that going on in my country. I am the chairman of the human rights group that run by the Ethiopian. There's about 5,000 members from Australia to here, to Canada. So I'm always on the phone meeting with people. Here is what I think, that even a group like you can make a difference on a young girl's life in Ethiopia. You have a representative of Congress in this area. If I send you a letter that I wrote, you change it a little bit to yours and send it to the senator or to a representative, explaining that we are supporting a group in Ethiopia who are abusing their own people. We should not do that. You won't believe that how much that alone will save people in Ethiopia. That alone, that's one letter. If I get to the representative, and they call me, if we put my number on there, and say, what can we do? And I tell them, says, cut the funding to Ethiopia until they correct their behavior. That is a direct result of your help by writing a letter, and I get in contact with your representative, and they write a letter like they did in the past to the Ethiopian government, saying, look, what is going on here? Even just calling the Ethiopian embassy in Washington, D.C., one phone call can save so many lives if it comes from a congressperson. Literally. Even that little video she's taping right now, if I post it on my wall, the government of Ethiopia sees it, hey, Obeng is talking about what we're doing to American kids, and they're about to write letters. You may see some girls tomorrow released from prison just because of that question that Mary asked. Literally. So you cannot do a big, you think that to help somebody, usually you have to do something big. You can only write a letter. You don't even have to donate money for it. Write a letter, say, I'm concerned, you are my representative, and this is what's happening, and we give money, taxpayers' money, $5 billion US money, goes to my country and pocketed only by a few people in the government. So that's what's happening right now as you speak. There's people are suffering.
Could you leave that letter, or like a similar letter at the school?
I can send it to Mary electronically, and Mary can share it with your teachers. If you wanted to do that, get in touch with your Mary or to your teachers, and then I can give you what to do. And then once you get there, you won't believe that how much difference. What we did at Bethel was we wrote 2,000 letters to one senator, and we sent it to him 20 at a time, 20 a day. They get so overwhelmed, they call the school. I guarantee your representative will call the school and say, hey, what is going on? What can we do? That's what we did, this strategy that we have.
Can you
Anyone
be a
else?
dual citizen, American and?
You can, but Ethiopia does not accept that yet. So they're working on it now to see if they can, but soon maybe they will. But there's a lot of talk in Ethiopia right now that if you are an American citizen, you cannot run for office in Ethiopia. You cannot have dual citizenship.
Would you have to rescind your Ethiopian citizenship then, and when you get your American?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that gladly. But if they accept it as a dual citizen, they will. But I have ties to Ethiopia, but I completely lost most of the culture and understanding. Here is one thing that I was told many times. I went home, I talked to people, and then I asked one of the girls who is Ethiopian. I said, hey, can we go out? She said, no. I said, why? She said, you sound American. And I don't know what that was. He said, you talk like an American. I'm not going to go out with you. They think I'm arrogant, I think. But yeah, those are things that I miss already. Even though I think that I'm still Ethiopian. Anyone else? Any last question? I don't want to keep you so long. There's one here, there's one upstairs. Go ahead.
So knowing everything you've got, or as you know everything you've gone through, what's something you would tell these guys, coming from a small community, coming from out here by South Dakota, what's something that you can share that will relate, that will stick to these guys as they move out of here?
Well, one thing that I really want you to look into is good to have fun, but please make sure that you're aware of what is going on in your own community, number one. And when we say community, I'm not talking about Ortonville only. The world is a lot more smaller than you think. I guarantee before I turn 70 years old, I may run into one of you somewhere in the future. So one thing you can do is to care about people in your community more. Because you can't love somebody across the sea if you don't love people in your neighborhood. I always tell people, I said, why do you have to go over there to do this when you don't do it here? So one thing that is community to me is important, And all of these craziness that people are really different, I don't buy into it. I have a deeper love, more than anything else, for people. Mother Teresa, that I read her book, one thing she said that do not let somebody leave you without being happier when they come to you, when they first came to you. So it said, don't let somebody leave your present without being happier than when they come to see you first. So if we do that, I think our community would be a better place. Our country would be a better place. Understanding how the world functions will be something good for you. We're not going to be just an isolated community within the United States. And one thing I always tell people, I said, the reason we were in Afghanistan for so long, that we had no clue about the culture and the people there when we got there, because we don't teach world history as much in the United States. The world know about us, we know less about them. In the US, we learn only our history. If we go out a little bit, it will be Europe, maybe a little bit of South America. But besides that, we don't really learn about Africa, about Asia or something. And we get involved in this war, we don't know what we're getting into most of the time. And young American died as a neglect, because we neglected to learn about this place before we go in first. So care for your own community, your own family. Make sure you pay attention to your brother and your sister. And instead of both of you being on the phone all the time, just get to know, make sure that you're aware of what is going on in your neighborhood and your own community. I think that's the best advice that I can give you. I'm a strong believer of if we love somebody enough, we cannot kill them, we cannot talk bad about them, because we don't have time to do that. There was somebody else up that who asked. I saw a hand somewhere. Go ahead. I can't see very well up there. Is anyone? Yes, go ahead.
When you're finished, can I take a picture of you?
Any one of you can take a picture with me. I'll be okay. Yes. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Things I talked about, UIS were safe, kind, responsible. Thank you guys for being an attentive audience. I appreciate it. The bell is going to ring in just a couple minutes to go to third hour. Nope, that's not true. To fourth hour and or lunch, depending on where you're headed. So head back to get anything that you need from your homeroom, and then we're going to go to fourth hour.